Everyone, welcome to the weekly share of the Zera Shimshon. It's Vav Tammuz, Tavshin Pei Dalid, Bria Sa'ilam, and it's Parshat Chukas, which is a very short and sweet Parshat. I hope it's not a double Parshat in Chutz La'aretz because we don't have a double Parshat here. So this is it's a little longer, but it's worth listening to because it has very interesting concepts. So it says, why give the command about the red heifer at Mara? Remember, they received some mitzvahs at that stop when they were going out of Egypt, Mara. Okay. So it says, Zeis Chukas HaTorah Asher Tziva Hashem Leimor. This is the decree of the Torah that Hashem commanded, saying, it says, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'yikchu elecha faraduma tamima asher ein bo mum asher lo ya'ala oil. Speak to the children of Israel, and they shall take to you a completely red cow, which is without blemish and upon which a yoke has not come. Now, they're talking about they were in the desert. Where did they get a red cow from? The Yerushalmi in Megillah 3, probably Mishnah 5, this third parak, the fifth parak, fifth halacha, states that the Mishkan was inaugurated on the first day of Nisan, in the second year. And the paraduma, the red cow, was burnt on the second day in order to purify those who were impure. This means that the first paraduma was used only in the second year after the Jews left Egypt. If that was the case, why were the Jews commanded to fulfill a mitzvah, paraduma, already at Mara, right after they left Egypt, when they would not actually be preparing the ashes until the Mishkan was inaugurated a year later? Why had they been given the mitzvah of paraduma prior to Matan Torah when they didn't seem to need it yet? In any case, even when they were able to finally perform the mitzvah, it was Klal Yisrael. How was Klal Yisrael able to present a paraduma to Moshe in the second year after leaving Mitzrayim? One of the laws of paraduma is that the cow may not have carried a load. As the Torah states, they shall take you a completely red cow upon which a yoke has not come. Not only that, not only a yoke, but any kind of burden on it. Not only that, the Gemara teaches that paraduma is not allowed to have done any work. It's Gemara Saita. How did Klal Yisrael know that the paraduma they were using had never done any work? Even if you argued that there was no problem because, as the Gemara states, one can purchase a paraduma from a non-Jew without concern that he used it for work. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah, this doesn't apply to the first paraduma. Why? After the mitzvah of paraduma was actually given, the non-Jews now knew that if they had used the cow for work, it would become disqualified for paraduma usage, which would be a large financial loss for anyone trying to raise and sell a red cow. Because this knowledge was widespread, the chances were that the red cow owned by a non-Jew had not been put to work. They would not have risk missing out on their profit. But before the mitzvah was given, there could be no such assumptions, because there was no reason for the non-Jew to refrain from using a red cow for work. So the question remains, how was Klal Yisrael able to believe the owner of the first red cow that he claimed it was never used for work? Perhaps you can take a different track, I think it should say, and suggest that the first paraduma had belonged to a Jew. Then the paraduma would be invalid only if the Jewish owner had intention to work with it, as opposed to a cow owned by a non-Jew where any work disqualifies it. There's a difference between paraduma of a Jew and non-Jew. A Jew must have intention to work with the animal in order to be invalidated. If he had no intention to work with it, it was done unintentionally, the animal remains kosher for paraduma purposes. However, if a non-Jew works the animal unintentionally, he still invalidates the animal. It would be difficult to make such an argument, since there is no question that the Egyptians were in control of the Jewish animals. They worked them in the fields and thus disqualified them for use as a paraduma. How then did they have a red cow in the wilderness that was valid for making the ashes of the paraduma? According to Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah and Parah, A cow in its second year, that is between 13 and 24 months, is kosher for the mitzvah of paraduma. Now, the Mishnah also tells us in Idios that the Egyptians' punishment lasted for 12 months from when the Maccas began. In the middle of the month of Nisan, their hold on the Jews began to weaken, and they were not in control of the Jews or their money as they were previously. 1 year later, Bnei Yisrael left Egypt. We could therefore suggest that Klal Yisrael used a paraduma that was born in Egypt after the Maccas began. That would mean that it was never used for work, even though the Egyptians were still in control at that time. A cow would have been too young to use for work. Bnei Yisrael would also not have worked a cow since they didn't have fields or vineyards of their own to plow. But once they left Egypt, it could have theoretically been used. It could theoretically have been used to carry a load. This is why Hashem commanded them this mitzvah already in Mara, so that they should be they could already prepare the paraduma from then, and be careful not to allow it to carry a load or work with. Since the Mishkan was inaugurated in the second year after the Exodus, any cow born after the Makkah started would be in its second year and would be valid for being burnt for its ashes as the halacha prescribed. All this makes sense according to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. The other sages disagree. They say that the paraduma needs to be at least 2 years old for it to be valid. That is, in its third year. According to this opinion, the paraduma had to have been born when Klal Yisrael were still full-fledged slaves in Egypt. In which case the question returns, how did the Jewish people know that the paraduma had not been used for work at some time during its existence? We must therefore say that Bnei Yisrael in the wilderness ruled according to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer and used the cow that was in its second year and no more. Okay, there's a more lengthy discussion in the Zera Shimshon for those who are interested. But we now understand why the mitzvah paraduma was given to Bnei Yisrael at Mara. True, they would only be carrying out the actual procedure after the establishment of the Mishkan. Okay, but since they would need to sprinkle its blood opposite the entrance to the Mishkan, but they were commanded to make a paraduma already at Mara in order for them to be careful not to do any work with it, so that it would be perfectly kosher for its ashes when it was finally time to use it. Before that, there was no reason to give the warning since the parah was still too young to work, and there was no need for it yet to be for an explicit command. So it says the Zera Shimshon in our Parsha and at Ois Gimel. And may we be Zoicha Be'ezras Hashem B'meiru V'yameinu V'nishiach Tzidkenu will have a new paraduma and bring the ashes and purify everybody. Have a good Shabbos.